Hello everyone and welcome to New Direction is Easier 2021. Our session today is entitled Remote Proctoring in Language Assessment, exploring the impact on test taker score and perception with our presenter, Radosvesta Vankova. So she has spent lots of time on this research and I really hope you guys can enjoy the session today.
Thank you, Huen, so much. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, sure. And just remember, if you have any question for our presenter, please type them into the chat box during any time of the session. We will have 10 minutes at the end where our question can be answered. I also now will hand over to our presenter and she will start with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm guessing you can see my screen, right? Just to confirm. Yeah, okay. Well, welcome everyone to my presentation. Thank you so much for choosing this session. I know there are some great sessions happening during New Directions. So thank you. I'm happy to share with you my dissertation, which I just completed in September with Lancaster University. And it is about remote proctoring in language assessment. And I explore the impact on test taker scores and perceptions. So let's go ahead and start. So as we know, online assessment has been utilized for decades, but COVID-19 brought another need, and that is online assessment at home. Now, the issues of security, privacy, and e-cheating are the main ones surrounding assessment at home. They have been researched, but the literature mostly suggests low-stake tests, online assessment around distance and collaborative learning, and concordance studies around performance, mostly for productive skills. Now, the pandemic forced testing in educational institutions and organizations to look into the solution of remote proctoring or remote invigilation. There are three types of remote proctoring. And you can see them here on the screen. The first one is very quickly AI only, which means that we have artificial intelligence algorithms which invigilate the test and the test takers. The second one is record and review, which is AI proctored or invigilated while the test is happening, but then any red flags or infractions are reviewed by a human. And the third one is human live invigilation, which could be aided by AI, and they go in order of low stakes to high stakes. Now, I decided to focus my research on Aptis, which is a British Council language performance test, and Aptis Remote, which was launched in the summer of 2020. And Aptis Remote uses the record and review remote proctoring solution. Now, the controversial nature of remote proctoring necessitates more research about test takers' perceptions and how their performance might be affected. I was really interested in finding out if Foucault's panopticon model or the idea of omnipresent surveillance has any bearing. I wanted to see how test takers perceive remote proctoring, what their feelings were about it, and so forth. So my research questions focused on test takers' performance in reading, listening, and grammar and vocabulary, and remote proctoring impact, their perceptions of and experiences about remote proctoring. And once I started actually analyzing the data, I decided to add a third question, which was about finding out a possible link between their performance, the test mode preference, and the delivery mode. I just wanted to see if there was any significant effect happening there. So the methodology, I decided to use a concurrent mixed methods approach and collect both quantitative and qualitative data. It was a counterbalance design with random equivalence. And I'll explain a little bit more about this. The participants were We recruited 70 university teachers in Mexico, and their average teaching experience was over 10 years. The survey design consisted of questionnaires, closed and open-ended questions, and semi-structured interviews, 2 groups of 3 participants each. Now, just a little bit more about the design. The participants were randomly allocated to different groups. On day 1, the first group took Aptis Remote at home, and that group consisted of 49 test takers. At the same time, the second group, which was 29 test takers, went to a test center to take Aptis at test center. On day 2, which happened 48 hours later, the 2 groups swapped. After each test, everyone completed a questionnaire, and I modified the questionnaires so that they were relevant to the tests that they were taking each day. The questionnaires were delivered online. Both the questionnaires and the semi-structured interviews were conducted in the test takers L1, which was Spanish, and then I translated them back into English. So Aptis Remote, Aptis in general, reports numerical scores from 0 to 50, and for reading, listening, and grammar and vocabulary. And for reading and listening, there are also CFR scores reported. I did different statistical analysis through SPSS. And what I'm going to show you here is, I'm not going to show the numerical statistical analysis, but just the CFR scores, because I think this might be a little bit more interesting. Just to mention that for all scores, Aptis Remote scored slightly higher than Aptis at Test Center. And the differences between the reading scores for Remote and Test Center was statistically significant. So for the CFR distribution, what you are seeing here is Aptis Remote for reading, and Aptis at Test Center for reading, Aptis Remote for listening, and Aptis at Test Center for listening. Now, it is quite interesting here to see that for the remote session, the reading scores were more test takers scored, had a C than the test takers who achieved a B2, 44 versus 22. For Aptis Test Center, the results were reversed. More test takers achieved the B2 than a C, and the difference was much smaller. Again, remember that these differences are statistically significant. I will present a few assumptions and conclusions also that came up maybe from the interviews, but it will be quite interesting to, in the future, to investigate this a little bit more, and why the results turn out the way they did, and what influenced them. Now, for listening, the results were more or less similar. These were not statistically significant, but it's still interesting to see these differences. Okay, let's move on. So the questionnaire, for the questionnaire, I had close-ended questions, which I analyzed quantitatively, and I had open-ended questions, which I analyzed qualitatively using in Vivo software. So let's start with the quantitative questions. Okay. Initial statistical analysis, well, and subsequent ones, showed high reliability and consistency for both questionnaires for remote and Aptis Test Center for the quantitative results and questions. I also run some statistical analysis like Wilson sign rank test. So there were overlapping items between the remote questionnaire and the test center questionnaire. And some of these questions referred to the testing conditions at home and testing conditions at test center, how the test takers felt. They had to choose an answer on a Likert scale from 5 to 1, strongly agree or strongly disagree, if they felt confident, comfortable, frustrated, or nervous. All the results were statistically significant. I compared the two questionnaires. The highest difference was between, it was about how they felt, how frustrated they felt. So the results showed slightly more positive attitudes towards Aptis Test Center. However, the differences were small, and overall, the attitudes were positive towards both delivery modes. Okay. There were some other questions from the questionnaire. They just almost 53% preferred Aptis Remote to Aptis Test Center. It was interesting to find out that almost 89% of the test takers didn't have previous remote proctoring experience. I've put a questionnaire from the background, from the demographics data, which I thought was quite interesting. One of the questions was about their living conditions, if they lived alone, if they lived with a spouse and children, or family members. So most of them, 62%, as you can see here, lived with someone else. I think this has implications also in terms of their anxiety levels, their conditions at home, if they had any noise disruptions, and also there were some interesting insights that came from the interviews as well. I also had a question about their computer knowledge, and again, if they had a pretty calm environment when they were working from home, and these questions had quite mixed results. So the qualitative results, I had 4 open-ended questions. I was particularly interested in the remote experience. So these questions were in the remote delivery questionnaire. The first one was their preference, and they had to, this question came up on day 2 when they had already done both tests. Also what they liked about the remote delivery, what they disliked about the remote delivery. And if they had any technical problems, if they felt that this could have somehow affected their performance. These were open-ended questions. They wrote comments again in the L1. And then what I did is I coded all the comments. I went through different rounds of coding in vivo. I had a second coder who coded independently, and our overall intercoder agreement in the end was pretty high, and allowed me to come up with the conclusions that I did. So for question 1, they preferred the remote delivery because of comfort and practicality. And they liked the test center because of practicality, support, and comfort. What you're seeing here is the majority I had quite a few different codes, but I picked the top 2 and 3. Some of the comments, what you're seeing is there were more distractions at the test center, such as outside noise and colleagues coming in and out, which was a preference for the remote delivery. And another quote, because one does not worry about the equipment and infrastructure that centers generally already have, as well as the personalized assistance at hand. Again, this is an example of preferring the test center because of the live support that they received and the practicality. So for questions 2 and 3, what they liked about remote proctoring and what they about the remote delivery and what they disliked. So some of their positive comments were others. I'm going to talk about others in a second. Practicality, they like the test interface, the comfort and the support. Another quote, the convenience of doing it at home, clear instructions and easy to use software. Some of the negative comments, again, others, just give me a second, I'll get to it. The onboarding process, quite a few found it a bit complicated and lengthy. This is something that they have to do beforehand, which includes a room scan, ID, pictures, this type of thing. They just like the platform and the remote proctoring. Now, there were quite a few comments which did not particularly relate to what I was really interested in researching. These comments referred to the test itself, comments such as, I found the questions easy, communication with admin. They had pre-test communication with Aptis admin support, questions about their own personal equipment, comments such as being part of innovation, the validity, security, perception, negative comments such as I ran out of time, I couldn't answer the question. There were also quite a few issues which will also come up a little bit later with their access codes. All of the test takers were given 3 access codes to complete the test. For each part, for listening, reading, and grammar and vocab, they had 3 different access codes. Some could not locate them on the day. They had quite a few issues with the access codes. I felt that this did not particularly relate to the remote proctoring experience itself, and this was more about communication. So all of these comments were coded under others. Okay. Here is something about dislike, a comment that you see. The rules that I had to keep my eyes straight ahead and I could be disqualified caused me tension. So this is about remote proctoring. It made me nervous to know that we had to do a scan of the room. This is about the onboarding process. So for question 4, if they had technical problems, did they feel that these problems somehow affected their performance? Now, it was interesting to find out, and not surprising actually, that 32 test takers out of 70 reported technical problems during their remote delivery, compared to only 9 out of 70 at the test center. I concentrated on the technical problems reported for the remote delivery. Now, what you're seeing here in this table is the problems were coded. Again, the majority came under others, and some of these were the access codes. The next technical problems refer to the platform itself. And then you're seeing a little bit about remote proctoring support and general technical issues and the interface. Now, it's interesting to find out that the majority did not think that there was any type of negative performance impact. Okay, I was very conservative in coding their comments about performance impact. If it was stated clearly, no, not at all, then I coded it as no. If it was stated clearly, yes, I have problems, yes, it affected me, I coded as yes. Anything in between, I coded as unclear. What you're seeing here is a quote that they couldn't enter the platform. I had problems entering the keys. By keys, they mean the access codes. I was nervous. So this was an example of yes. And then I located the icon. Locating the icon to start the test was an issue, but then not at all. They did not feel that this affected their performance. The interviews, so there were two groups of 3 people each that we interviewed. These interviews were done on day 3 after they had completed both tests, and these test takers were randomly allocated. I identified different themes after looking at the transcripts of both interview groups, and these themes were about remote proctoring. They are general experience and views, positive and negative, their views towards artificial intelligence, and future views and improvement. Okay, so the candidate's performance for all measured skills is higher for Aptis Remote. For research question 2, most preferred remote, even though they reported technical problems. They were slightly more comfortable and confident and less frustrated and nervous during test center delivery. Convenience and comfort might minimize anxiety for Aptis Remote. There is a general mistrust towards AI based on lack of understanding and information about the specific algorithms and systems. And for question 3, I found that the only significant effect is the main effect for delivery mode on reading scores. Higher scores for AR for both test preferences. So what are some of our conclusions? Remote delivery does not affect performance except higher scores for reading. Convenience and home comfort seem to be the key advantages for remote, especially when COVID restrictions are taken into consideration. Again, my test takers were in Mexico, which I collected the data in June. They did not have many restrictions, but some people felt quite a bit of unease traveling and using public transportation to the test center. Then there are some negative technological perceptions against remote mode and AI. However, this mostly stems from lack of knowledge. The omnipresent surveillance with these test takers did not really seem to be an issue, which was an interesting find. They do prefer human invigilation, even if they have 100% reliable tech support for record and review. There is something about not knowing how the AI algorithm responds to basic gestures, which are not cheating behavior. For example, looking outside through the window or moving your hands to, for example, scare away mosquitoes or something, which came up in one of the interviews. Again, anxiety can be reduced with better understanding and awareness of systems, and they all expressed views that remote proctoring will be dominant within 2 years or so. The study does have some limitations, relatively narrow context, university teachers in Mexico. I explored only receptive skills in grammar and vocabulary, and there are a few methodological limitations. What are the implications? Well, for test developers to develop tests that are reliable and valid for remote proctoring modes. For remote proctoring providers, having best practices and ensuring that test takers are familiar with the ideas, the algorithms, everything that happens behind the scene, who's watching them behind the camera, what are they allowed, what are they not allowed to do. And for test takers to get familiar with these new types of technology. And if I can paraphrase a quote from Dawson, that now is our chance to basically create this positive awareness raising approach, which will lead to creating trust and better experience for the test takers and having this positive idea and confidence in remote systems. Further research is definitely needed for more high stakes contests into test takers' perceptions and experiences, not just their performance, also productive skills, especially speaking, and other contexts and test taker representation to broaden the scope. This is just a very short snapshot of the bibliography that I used. And thank you very much for listening. I'm ready for any questions that you might have.
Hi again. Thank you so much for your useful presentation. We also have 2 comments from our audience. So yeah, so the first one from Fatima, I think a mixed method design could be better for the participants.
It was a mixed design.
Yeah, okay. So that's the comments from our audience. That's the first one. If you don't have any comments on that, we can go to the next one. So we have, yeah. So the second one, and I think you can see that in the chat box too. Thank you so much for the presentation. Yeah, from Jun Kim. She's now working on paper about the remote proctoring, and also your result of the perception replicate of the previous finding, and yeah, in her study. So there was a lot of frustration for sure. Also, the result of the score comparison are very interesting. What would be your interpretation of score difference depending on the testing mode? Also, I would like to read your work. How can I read your dissertation? If I may, I also hope to get your feedback on my research idea, as that you can see on the best student research idea. Really, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Good luck with it. Certainly an extremely interesting area, and I think extremely relevant nowadays. Interpretation of score differences. I thought one of my assumptions for the reading that was statistically significant and definitely higher for remote, one of my assumptions was that the test takers were at home. They did report feeling more comfortable. They were in their own environment, using their own devices, even though some of them reported outside external noises that obviously they cannot control the external environment. Some did report feeling anxious because, for example, this test taker had a small daughter. She was a little bit worried that she might open the door and come in any minute. So even though they did report some anxieties, I think that overall, they just felt more comfortable at home, and just having that convenience of sitting at home and using their own equipment possibly helped. I'm not sure. I mean, I would be definitely interested in researching this more, and also looking at productive skills. I mean, especially speaking. This would be quite interesting to see what kind of difference there is in scores. Some people also reported, and I guess this depends on the personality of people, but some reported that at the test center, they in general felt more nervous and anxious because they were different. They could see the different test takers. They were kind of like waiting a bit anxiously. Also, People could leave the room, let's say if they needed to, go to have a break, or they were finishing early. There were invigilators, the human invigilators moving around. So my assumption is mostly this, that the home environment for people in general provides this possibly calming atmosphere where they were probably able to concentrate more. That's the assumption. Now, in terms of reading my work, thank you. I would be trying, hopefully successfully, to see if I can publish it in some journal. So I'm sure you will be able to follow up there. But do feel free to reach out and connect with me if you'd like to send me an email. I'll be happy to discuss certain things, and if I can help you in any way, definitely. Do we have any other questions? I think we're maybe.
Yeah, we have one more from Jamie, and I think we have only 1 minute more for the answering. Yeah, we focus rightly on the frustration and technical demands of at-home remote proctoring. Do you think there is potential to build more on the positive potential, like accessibility for lots of candidates taking the test in your own environment also?
Yes, thank you for the question. Very quickly. Yes, definitely. I think this is one of the issues that could be avoided, and it could help us to bring this positive idea, just like bringing more awareness. If we provide test takers with enough opportunities for them to be able to test their system, make sure everything is working fine, having the right support, immediate support that they can access right away, and making sure that any type of anxiety questions that they might have during the test. Oh, what if this happens? Is my test going to be invalid? If we can address these questions and eliminate that type of anxiety, yes, I'm pretty sure we can have more positively, I guess, oriented test takers to be taking these tests at home.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I guess that could be the end of our session today. Really, thank you for joining with us.
Thank you.
And so before you log out, please help us to do a little survey, just 2 questions. I already rate 5 stars for our great presenters today. Thank you again, and I wish you all health and enjoy our event. Thank you.
Thank you. See you at the conference. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you.